begin in Sydney, where it's shaping up to be a miserable Monday morning on the city's train network, with warnings of more delays and cancellations.
Today, Sydney reporter Jack Hahn is tracking the commute from Campbelltown. Jack, good morning. Just how significant will the impact be?
Well, that is the question that we all want the answer to, Sarah and Carl, but unfortunately we can't give it to you right now because we don't actually know. It will all depend on who calls in sick, and mixed messages have come in overnight. It's been reported that some train drivers and guards have been texted from the union telling them to chuck another sickie today, while other guards and train drivers report being told to come to work to prove the state government wrong. So it's hard to pinpoint, but we are tracking the trains live for you this morning to try and help you out on your morning commute. We'll fire up the tracker for you right now. The T1 Western line for people coming in from Penrith and Parramatta. We're seeing 81% of trains running on time on that line, so that is good. However, the T3 Liverpool line is emerging as a problem point. 66% of trains on time on that line, and I can tell you that number is getting worse as we speak, so it might be best to avoid the Liverpool line this morning. The T4 looks good. The T5, 50% of trains running on time, and the T8, which is the airport and south line, we are seeing 92% of services running on time, which is good for viewers that are watching outside of Sydney that are potentially flying here today. It is probably reliable enough that you will be able to get on a train, but unfortunately it's unpredictable because, for example, the T8 line where we're joining you from, this was the hardest hit line on Friday, so that goes to show the unpredictability of this morning's potential industrial action. As such, the state government is warning people to just stay clear of the Sydney Trains network completely if you can, telling parents to send kids on school buses or to drive children to school. We'll track it for you this morning. It's certainly shaping up to be an unpredictable morning here in Sydney.
Yeah, that's for sure, Jack. Thank you.
Victoria's Police Chief Commissioner has resigned, effective immediately, just days after a vote of no confidence in his leadership. Live to Today Melbourne reporter Christina Hearn. Chris, what did Shane Patton have to say?
Well, Jane, last night, Shane Patton dropped this bombshell statement saying, given the current circumstances, he is stepping down from his role effective immediately. Those circumstances are a vote of no confidence that was passed in his leadership by 87% of the force on Friday. It comes as the force is locked in a bitter and drawn-out pay dispute with the Victorian government. The now former Chief Commissioner said in a statement last night, "It is with a heavy heart I've made this decision. However, I think it is the right one to allow fresh leadership in the role. To the Victorian community, I thank you for giving me the privilege to have served you. This is the reason I and all police officers turn up each day." The Victorian Premier responded by announcing Rick Nugent, who is our current Emergency Management Commissioner, as the acting Chief of Police. The opposition leader has called on the Police Minister to stand down in what is now, Jane, a full-blown crisis in Victoria Police.
Christine, thank you. We can show you some exclusive CCTV this morning of the moment a brave Brisbane shop worker fights off two teenage robbers, stopping them from escaping with trays of cigarettes. Live to Today Queensland reporter Kendall Gilding in Brisbane. Kendall, this pair has now been hit with a string of charges.
Good morning, Jane. That's right. These alleged thieves were attempting this robbery, but it was scuttled by a very brave worker. This quick stop here on Charlotte Street in Brisbane City wasn't even open yet. It was 4:30 on Sunday morning, and the worker was out the back setting up for the day when in stroll these half-dressed teenagers. They're using their shirts to cover their faces. They head straight for the cigarette cabinet and just start helping themselves. Once they feel they've collected enough cigarettes, hundreds of dollars worth, they head out the door, but this brave worker that caught them runs straight into their path, flipping those cigarettes all over the floor. The teens do attempt to still pick some up before heading out the door. They were chased down the street by that cashier, but made their getaway. Fortunately, police were able to catch up with them a short time later. The 17-year-old and 18-year-old have been charged with a combined 7 offences, including robbery in company and possession of a knife. They are both expected to face court this morning.
Okay, Kendall, thank you. Homeowners and businesses are holding their breath ahead of the RBA's first meeting of the year tomorrow, where it is expected to cut the official cash rate for the first time in 5 years. It's been sitting at 4.35% since November 2023. If there is a cut, mortgage holders must then wait to see whether their banks will pass on the decision. More polling pain for the Prime Minister this morning as a majority of voters say the government doesn't deserve to be re-elected. Live to Today federal politics reporter Liz Daniels. Liz, it isn't all bad news for Labor though.
It's not, Jane. The Prime Minister himself has seen a slight bump in the latest news poll. Anthony Albanese is still ahead in the contest on who would make the better Prime Minister. He's had a 1-point bump while Mr Dutton suffered a 1-point drop, so his lead has increased there. The other numbers, though, are poor for Labor. Its primary votes flatlined on a record low of 31%. The Coalition's is down. Minor parties of independents have picked up that point. Translated onto a two-party preferred basis, the result is still a 51 to 49% lead in the Coalition's favour. That's a swing of about 3% since the last election. Now, if that result was replicated across the country, it'd see 7 or 8 seats fall. Now, the most likely outcome of that would be a hung parliament. That's where the negotiations with the crossbenchers would come in. Now, one sentiment among voters that would have the government particularly worried this morning, Jane, is that when asked if Labor deserves a second term, 53% said no.
That's not good news for Labor. Thank you very much, Liz. European leaders are in panic mode this morning amid growing concerns over Donald Trump's push to work with Russia to end the war in Ukraine. Live to Nine's US correspondent Lauren Tomasi. Lauren, an emergency meeting has been set for tomorrow.
And that will happen in Paris, Jane. Good morning to you. Leaders from across Europe going to this emergency summit as they look to contend with how America is going to move forward as Donald Trump and his administration push to end the war in Ukraine. The big concern from these European leaders is that any such deal made by Donald Trump could threaten the security of Europe. And as Donald Trump looks to make that in-person meeting with Vladimir Putin, the continent is looking to present that real united front. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is among the leaders who will be attending this emergency summit tomorrow. He's called it a once-in-a-generation moment for national security. But when it comes to the Trump administration itself, well, security advisor Mike Walls says Europe simply isn't being iced out of these negotiations.
They may not like some of the sequencing that is going on in these negotiations, but I have to push back on this any notion that they aren't being consulted. They absolutely are. And at the end of the day, though, this is going to be under President Trump's leadership that we get this war to an end.
And Mike Walls there will be one of a number of senior administration officials, along with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who will be travelling to Saudi Arabia over the next few days. They'll be meeting with their Russian counterparts there as they begin to look at these talks to negotiate an end to the war. America's top diplomat Rubio saying one conversation certainly isn't going to be the end here, but one sticking point in these negotiations is the fact that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukraine has not been invited to the table for these talks. He says he will not accept any decision made by the United States and Russia on Ukraine's behalf. Jane.
Lauren, thank you.